My father died on a Tuesday, and by Friday, my stepmother had emptied his bank accounts. I found out at the funeral when the funeral director pulled me aside and whispered that the payment had bounced. "Your stepmother said she'd handle everything," he said quietly, looking uncomfortable. "But the check came back insufficient funds. I'm sorry to bring this up now, but we need payment before we can proceed with the burial." I stood there in my black dress, holding a crumpled tissue, trying to process what he'd just said. My father had $200,000 in savings. He'd shown me the statements just 3 months ago when we updated his will. He'd been so proud, so careful with money his whole life. He'd worked as a mechanical engineer for 40 years, lived modestly, invested wisely. That money was supposed to be split between me and my younger half-sister Emma. Half for each of us. That's what his will said. That's what he promised. But now, there wasn't enough to pay for his funeral. I'm Jessica Hartman. I'm 32 years old, and I thought I knew my family. My father, Thomas Hartman, remarried when I was 19. My mother had died from cancer 2 years before that, and I understood when Dad said he was lonely. When he introduced me to Patricia, I wanted to like her. She was 45, 15 years younger than him, and she seemed nice enough. Not warm exactly, but polite, respectful. She had a daughter, Emma, who was 12 at the time. Dad and Patricia got married 6 months later. It was a small ceremony, just family. I flew home from college for the weekend. Emma was my flower girl. Patricia cried during the vows. I thought they were happy tears. For 13 years, things seemed fine. Patricia was a stay-at-home mom. Emma grew up, went to college, got engaged. Dad kept working, kept saving. He talked about retirement, about traveling with Patricia, about leaving me and Emma secure. When he was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer last year, everything accelerated. He had 6 months, maybe a year. He wanted to get his affairs in order. We met with his lawyer, Robert Chen, in March. Dad, Patricia, Emma, and me, all sitting in Robert's office overlooking downtown Seattle. Dad's will was straightforward. The house would go to Patricia since they'd bought it together. His retirement accounts and savings, $200,000, would be split equally between me and Emma. 50-50? Patricia could live off the house and her own retirement. Emma and I would each get $100,000 to start our lives. Patricia smiled and nodded. She squeezed Dad's hand. "That's so generous, Tom," she said. "You're taking care of everyone." Emma hugged him. "Thank you, Daddy Tom. I'm so grateful." I cried. Not just because of the money, but because it felt like Dad was saying goodbye, making sure we'd all be okay after he was gone. He died 4 months later. It was peaceful, they said. He went in his sleep at home with Patricia beside him. I got the call at 6 in the morning. I drove from Portland to Seattle in 3 hours, crying the whole way. When I arrived at the house, Patricia met me at the door. Her eyes were red, her face pale. "He's gone, Jessica. He's really gone." We held each other and cried. The next few days were a blur. Planning the funeral, writing the obituary, calling relatives. Patricia handled most of it. She said she wanted to, that it helped her feel close to Dad. I was grateful. I was drowning in grief, barely able to function. Emma flew in from California. The 3 of us sat at Dad's kitchen table, going through his things, sharing memories. The funeral was scheduled for Friday. A simple service at the church Dad attended, then burial next to my mother. Patricia arranged everything: the flowers, the program, the reception. I thought she was being strong for all of us. Then the funeral director pulled me aside. I excused myself from the viewing room and followed him to his office. He closed the door and sat behind his desk, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Hartman, I don't want to add to your stress, but we have a problem. The check your stepmother gave us for the funeral expenses bounced. It was drawn on your father's account, but there are insufficient funds. That's impossible, I said. My father had $200,000 in savings. The funeral director shifted in his seat. I can only tell you what the bank told us. The account she drew from has a balance of $300. My ears started ringing. $300? That doesn't make sense. He looked at me with pity. I suggest you contact the bank directly, and perhaps your father's lawyer. I'm sorry. I know this is a terrible time. I walked back to the viewing room in a daze. Patricia was standing by Dad's casket, talking to Emma. They were laughing softly at some memory. I walked up to them. Patricia, I need to talk to you. Now. She looked at me, her smile fading. What's wrong? The funeral director just told me the check bounced. He says Dad's account is empty. Her face went pale. That can't be right. There must be some mistake. Then we need to go to the bank and figure it out, I said. Right now. Patricia glanced at Emma, then back at me. Jessica, we're in the middle of your father's funeral. Can't this wait? No, I said, my voice rising. It can't. Dad had $200,000. Where is it? People were starting to stare. Patricia grabbed my arm and pulled me into a side room. She closed the door and turned to face me, her expression suddenly cold. Lower your voice. You're making a scene. Tell me where the money is, I said. Patricia crossed her arms. Your father and I made some financial decisions in his final months. Decisions that were between us as husband and wife. What decisions? I asked. What did you do? She lifted her chin. Tom wanted to make sure Emma and I were taken care of. He knew you were financially stable with your job and your mother's life insurance. He decided to shift some assets. Some? I said. He had $200,000. The funeral director says there's $300 left. Where's the rest? Patricia's eyes narrowed. That's none of your business. It absolutely is, I said, my hands shaking. His will says that money is supposed to be split between me and Emma. Half each. Patricia laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. Wills can be changed, Jessica. And they were. I felt like I'd been punched. What are you talking about? Your father updated his will 2 weeks before he died. He was very clear. Everything goes to me. You're lying, I said. We were all there in March. We all heard what he wanted. March was a long time ago, Patricia said. A lot can change when someone is dying. He changed his mind. I don't believe you, I said. Show me the new will. Patricia smiled. You'll see it when the lawyer reads it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a funeral to attend. My father's funeral that you can't pay for because you stole his money. She stepped closer, her voice low and vicious. I didn't steal anything. I'm his widow. What's his is mine. That's how marriage works. Now you can either compose yourself and say goodbye to your father with dignity, or you can leave. Your choice. I left. I drove straight to Robert Chen's office. His secretary tried to stop me, but I walked past her and knocked on his door. Robert looked up, startled. Jessica? I thought you'd be at the funeral. Patricia says my dad changed his will. I said, my voice shaking. Is that true? Robert's face fell. He gestured for me to sit. He closed the door behind his secretary. Jessica, I'm so sorry. Yes, your father came to me 2 weeks before he passed. He said he wanted to revise his will. Did he come alone? I asked. Robert hesitated. No, Patricia was with him. Was he coherent? I pressed. Was he on pain medication? Could he even understand what he was signing? Robert looked uncomfortable. He was lucid when I spoke with him. Weak, but aware. He said he wanted to make sure Patricia and Emma were taken care of. He seemed certain. What did the new will say? I asked. Robert pulled a file from his cabinet and handed it to me. I read it, my hands shaking. Everything to Patricia. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts. All of it. I got nothing. Not a dollar. Not a mention except to explicitly exclude me from any inheritance. "This isn't right," I whispered. "He wouldn't do this." "Jessica," Robert said gently, "I have to tell you something. When your father came in, he seemed confused about some details. He kept asking Patricia questions, looking to her for answers. She did most of the talking. I had concerns, but he signed the document. His signature is valid." "Was he on morphine?" I asked. "Fentanyl patches? Anything that might impair his judgment?" Robert nodded slowly. "I believe so. He mentioned pain management." "Can we challenge this?" I asked. "Can we prove he wasn't competent to change his will?" Robert leaned back in his chair. "You can try. But it's difficult. Patricia is his legal spouse. She has rights. The burden of proof is on you to show he lacked capacity. You'd need medical records, testimony from his doctors, evidence of coercion. It's expensive, and it's not guaranteed." "How expensive?" I asked. Robert sighed. $50,000 to $100,000 in legal fees. Maybe more if it goes to trial. "I don't have that kind of money," I said. "I know," Robert said quietly. "That's what makes these cases so difficult. The people who steal everything are often the only ones who can afford to defend it." I sat there, feeling the weight of it all. My father was dead. My stepmother had stolen his entire estate, and I couldn't afford to fight her. I thought of something. What about Emma? She was supposed to get half. Does she know Patricia cut her out too? Robert shook his head. "The will gives everything to Patricia, but it includes a provision that Patricia will provide for Emma as she sees fit. It's not legally binding, but it's in the document." "So Patricia has all the money and all the power," I said. "Essentially, yes." Robert paused. "Jessica, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but 3 days after your father signed the new will, Patricia came back alone. She asked me about transferring assets before death to avoid estate taxes. I advised her on some strategies. 2 days later, your father's accounts were drained. The money was moved to joint accounts, and then to accounts in Patricia's name only. She planned this," I said. "She knew he was dying, and she took everything." Robert nodded. "I believe so. But believing isn't proving. You'd need bank records, testimony, a paper trail showing intent. It's all there, but getting it in court is another matter." I stood up, my legs shaky. "Thank you for being honest with me." Robert stood too. "I'm sorry, Jessica. Your father was a good man. He deserved better. So do you." I drove back to Portland in a fog. I didn't go back to the funeral. I couldn't face Patricia, couldn't stand in front of my father's casket knowing what she'd done. Emma called me that night. "Jessica, where did you go? You just disappeared." "Patricia told me," I said. "About the will." Emma was quiet for a moment. "She told me too. I'm so sorry. How much did she tell you?" I asked. "That Dad decided to leave everything to her, that he thought you were financially stable and didn't need it. That's what she said." "And you believed her?" I asked. Emma hesitated. "I don't know what to believe. He was my stepdad. He was good to me. Maybe he did want Mom to have everything." "Emma," I said carefully, "did you know the will said you'd get half? That we'd each get 100,000? "No," Emma said. "I didn't know there were amounts. I just knew Dad wanted to take care of everyone." "The new will gives everything to your mom," I said. "She's supposed to provide for you as she sees fit, but there's nothing binding." "Emma, she took all of it, $200,000. She drained his accounts before he died and then couldn't even pay for his funeral." Emma was quiet. The funeral was paid for, she said. Mom handled it. I paid for it, I said. I gave the funeral home my credit card after the check bounced. Emma, your mom stole everything and left me with the bill for Dad's burial. I heard Emma's breathing on the other end of the line. Jessica, I can't get in the middle of this. She's my mom. I'm not asking you to get in the middle, I said. I'm telling you what happened so you understand. Your mom is the only one with access to that money now. If she decides not to give you anything, you have no recourse. Emma, please be careful. I have to go, Emma said, and hung up. I spent the next week researching elder financial abuse, undue influence, and will contests. I learned that Washington state has laws protecting the elderly from exploitation. I learned about forensic accountants who can trace money. I learned about lawyers who specialize in estate fraud. And I learned that all of it costs money I didn't have. My father had been my safety net. When I lost my job last year, he'd helped with rent. When my car broke down, he'd covered repairs. Now he was gone, and the money he'd saved for me was in Patricia's accounts. I was on my own, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I started making calls. I contacted Dad's doctors and requested his medical records from his final months. I subpoenaed his bank records through a lawyer I hired on contingency, someone who agreed to take my case for 30% of whatever we recovered. Her name was Linda Vasquez, and she had a reputation for winning impossible cases. When I showed her everything, the timeline, the medical records, the bank transfers, she smiled. This is a good case, she said. Your father was on high-dose opioids when he signed that will. His doctor's notes say he was experiencing confusion and disorientation. The bank records show massive transfers 2 days after the will was signed, all initiated by Patricia. And the fact that she couldn't pay for the funeral is proof the money is gone. We can work with this. How long will it take? I asked. Linda shrugged. 6 months to a year, maybe more. Estate litigation is slow. Patricia will fight us every step of the way. But we have a shot. I signed the retainer. We filed a petition to invalidate the second will and restore the original. Patricia hired her own lawyer, a man named Douglas Brent who specialized in defending wealthy clients. The discovery process began. Over the next 6 months, Linda deposed Patricia 3 times. Each time, Patricia's story changed slightly. First, Dad had asked her to move the money. Then, he'd told her to do it for tax reasons. Then, he'd wanted to make sure she was secure. Under questioning, she couldn't explain why he'd need to move money for taxes when estate taxes didn't apply to amounts under $5 million. She couldn't produce any written instructions from Dad. And she couldn't explain why, if Dad wanted her to have everything, he'd told me just 3 months before he died that Emma and I would split his savings. Linda was brilliant. She brought in Dad's oncologist, who testified that in his final weeks, Dad had been on fentanyl patches, morphine, and anxiety medication that often caused confusion. She brought in the bank manager, who testified that all the transfers were made in person by Patricia, not Dad, and that Dad had never called or visited the bank. She brought in the funeral director, who testified that Patricia's check had bounced and that I'd paid for everything. And then Linda did something I didn't expect. She subpoenaed Patricia's financial records. What we found was staggering. In the 2 months after Dad died, Patricia had spent $80,000. A new car for Emma, a trip to Hawaii, designer clothes, a down payment on a condo in Florida. She'd also transferred $50,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands. When Linda confronted her in deposition, Patricia broke down. She admitted that she'd been planning for months, that she'd convinced Dad to sign the new will by telling him I didn't need the money, that I'd be fine, that Emma needed it more. She admitted she'd moved the money before he died so I couldn't challenge it. and she admitted she'd spent most of it because she thought she'd get away with it. The judge was not impressed. He ruled that Dad had lacked the capacity to sign the second will due to medication and undue influence. He invalidated it and restored the original. He ordered Patricia to return all of Dad's money, plus interest and legal fees. The total came to $220,000. Patricia claimed she didn't have it. The judge ordered her to sell the house. She did, and the proceeds went into an escrow account. Emma and I each received our $100,000. Patricia got what was left after legal fees, about $15,000. Emma called me the day the money hit her account. "Jessica, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have believed you." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry too. I wish it hadn't come to this." "Mom's furious," Emma said. "She says you destroyed the family." "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "Your mom did that when she stole from my father." Emma was quiet. "I know. I see that now. I just want you to know, I'm grateful for what you did. You could have walked away." "I couldn't," I said. "It wasn't about the money. It was about what was right, what Dad wanted." Emma and I are rebuilding our relationship slowly. It's not easy. Patricia doesn't speak to me, which is fine. I don't need her in my life. I took my $100,000 and did what Dad would have wanted. I paid off my student loans, bought a reliable car, and put the rest in savings. I think about him every day. I wish he was here to see what I did with his gift. If you're listening to this and you're dealing with something similar, I want you to know it's not about the money. It's about justice. It's about standing up when someone tries to rewrite history, to steal what doesn't belong to them, to take advantage of someone who can no longer speak for themselves. My father worked his whole life to build that security for me and Emma. Patricia tried to take it, thinking I'd be too grieving, too overwhelmed, too broke to fight back. She almost got away with it. If you're in this situation, get help. Document everything. Find a lawyer who will work on contingency if you can't afford upfront fees. Request medical records, subpoena bank records. Build your case piece by piece. It's hard, it's exhausting, and it's expensive. But sometimes, justice is worth the cost. My father deserved better than to have his wishes ignored in his final days. I fought for him because he couldn't fight for himself. And in the end, the truth won.